Well, brother, thank you for joining us here, man. I'm so excited. This has been a long time coming. We're going to make this happen.
Sounds good.
Right off the bat, Raph, I got a gift for you. This right here, sir, is a compilation of illustrated Greek myths, and it's for you. There you go.
Thank you.
And I would love for you to turn to page 30, if you don't mind. Turn to page 30 and tell me whose name you read there.
Vulcan and Melisabur?
No. So on the left over there, you see that little starting with an H?
Yes.
Hephaestus.
Right.
Hephaestus, the god of fire, metalworking, stonemasonry, and forges. In other words, the god of getting things done, baby.
All right.
In many ways, Hephaestus was the inspiration for the deity that was later known as Techne. So the idea of Techne was embodied by this god, Hephaestus, as well as the muses. Let me ask you a question about myTechne. Why did you decide to call it myTechne? When you look at that pantheon that you have in front of you of all of the Greek gods available to you, why did you go with that particular name?
For sure, right? When I think about, what I'm trying to do here in the realm of success, personal development, productivity, there's a lot of emphasis in this industry around, theoretical knowledge, right? People love to talk and give advice and, create the books and ebooks and whatnot. And I think that's all very valuable. But one thing I truly wholeheartedly believe is that if people aren't taking action and getting shit done and creating outcomes, all of that goes to waste. So when I was thinking about what is that word that truly encaptures people taking action to create values in their life that is meaningful, Techne was the word, right? Which is all about practical knowledge, right? It's the skill or art of doing something, of achieving something, of creating an outcome. It's context dependent, right? And it's for the everyday person. That's something I truly do believe. It's that, success is not limited to the 1%. It's for everybody, and everybody can do it if they have the right skills in their toolkit to execute according to their plan, according to what matters to them. And Techne captures that. It's for the everyday person. It's for the craftsman. It's for the architect. It's for the folks in medicine.
It's for the makers, right?
Yes.
And I think that's the definition, that's the word that I would apply to this modern generation of creatives, of people who have multiple side hustles, people who are working in the online economy, the gig economy, so on and so forth. They're all makers in some way or another. That's very interesting that you chose Techne, and I couldn't think of a better name. I poured through that book myself, and I said, was there another version of this platform that you're building that we could have called, Zeus, Athena, Poseidon, and whatnot? And nothing quite struck me as perfect as Techne. That's the real word that I think you've just found the word that's going to work for you for the rest of time.
Yes.
It doesn't get any better than that. Why do you think in ancient Greece, though, they looked down on Technes? Is that even a word? Technes? People who participate in the Techne?
Yeah, I think, back in the day, how people considered success and the elite, the 1%, were the folks who talked about science and mathematics.
The philosophers, right? Yeah.
Right? And then there's the everyday person who are out there, farmers and whatnot, they're doing their thing. But one thing we fail to recognize is that those are the people that create the bedrock for society. These are the people you go to when you're sick. These are the people you go to when you need food. These are the people you go to when you need infrastructure and roads and hospitals and schools. But they don't get enough attention. It's always the big picture thinkers, right? The philosophers, and nothing against this group of individuals, right? I think I think this group definitely have done some impressive things that shapes our modern world. But we're at a point now with technology, with data, with where society is heading, that everything's starting to get democratized. And the everyday person, doesn't matter if you didn't go to university, doesn't matter if you live in some third world country, you have opportunities, you have tools to create value as someone who went to Harvard.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing that in the everyday world when it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to the creative and the maker
movement.
Movement. And my goal, my mission with myTechne is really empower this movement to further accelerate, to give the tools, to equip people to do it. That's really what I wholeheartedly believe in.
So for listeners right now who might have skipped the intro for this, where we talked briefly about myTechne, could you describe what exactly myTechne is? It's a fascinating concept, but I want to hear it straight from you.
Yeah. So on a business level, myTechne is a personal development company that offers media and technology to really enable people to create their versions of success, their success systems, and this concept is predicated on this trend that we're talking about, which is, the world is only going to get busier. It's only going to get more multifaceted. It's only going to get more complex. And, we're seeing that right now, especially in the millennial demographic and all the years, younger as well. So how can somebody navigate this complex and busy world, yet at the same time, this abundance of information and tools? How can they combine these forces together and then pursue the things that matter to them? And myTechne is one piece of that. And we're going to achieve that through media. So the podcast, short form content, blogs and whatnot, and the technology that we're building to enable that.
You're taking those insights and you're making them actionable. And I love that, because I feel like the market's very much saturated with resources. Everyone has got a podcast. Everyone's got books coming out. They're dropping Skillshare courses. They're, putting out content, but very little of it is actually designed to help you and navigate, start from point A to point B, walk you through the process of building something and creating just that, the system. I was actually alarmed. I was teaching a class before this, and I asked my class of 120, like, how many of y'all have heard about Asana? One hand went up. And then I said, well, how many of y'all have a to-do list or some sort of, task management system? Maybe like a third of the class's hands went up. And I'm like, yeah, this is a bunch of like second, third, and fourth years who still haven't figured out the basics of productivity. Like, you still don't know that you have to write down things that you're going to do and then be accountable to them. Is myTechne something that's going to show people these truths about productivity?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're going to talk about time, you're going to talk about energy, you're going to talk about attention, like the elements of productivity.
Exactly. And, one thing that we're taking a different approach to is this underlying principle. So in addition to that, worldly belief I have about the world only getting more complex, a guiding principle for myTechne and my life is this notion that the principles of success are universal, right? So you have to set goals, you have to be self-aware, you have to work hard, you have to be resourceful, empathetic, so on and so forth. But how it's applied is personal. And I think that's the key part, because up until now, this success industry has been focused on these cookie cutter solutions. Here are the 10 things you have to do to be productive, to be successful, and one thing that has not worked for me is precisely trying to adapt myself to these cookie cutter templates.
Yeah, almost like BuzzFeed-like ways of going about your productivity, right?
Right, exactly. So our belief is, how can we give people the tools that they can use to craft their own system, right? So for someone, someone like Asana may not work, right? They don't like to use digital tools to manage their productivity. They're old school, pen and paper. They want to use a journal.
Sure.
Hey, that's cool, right? Like I don't care what processes, what tools, what systems you have in place, as long as you're intentionally creating and adapting a system that works for you, and you're being intentional about how you pursue your success. That's all I'm trying to do here. That's all I'm trying to enable here. And that's really, what is going to be our claim to fame.
And talk to me about this other element of customization with the platform too. Like, I'm a big fan of David Allen's work, the Getting Things Done framework. The challenge with that is it's one size fits all. He's got his templated approach to things. He's got his books, he's got his cards, he's got his map. But on Friday when we chatted, you talked about AI, you talked about artificial intelligence and machine learning being a part of myTechne, and that got me really excited. How do you envision that playing out? How is that going to work?
Yeah, so, before I answer that question, to take a step back, right now, myTechne is primarily focused on the media portion of the business, right? So the podcasts, so the monthly show, the Canvas series, the weekly show, Break the System. We're about to launch a long-form series of blogs called A Systems and Me. And the intent behind these pieces of content is to begin gathering these requirements, to understand where are the configuration points, right? Back to that principle that the success principle is universal, but how they're applied is personal. I'm trying to figure out what are those points in these success principles that make it personal. So what's an example? When I think back to when I interviewed you on the Canvas series, I did a bunch of research, and in the early days of your calendar system, I believe you had 7 colors in the RGB scale, and you had different meanings for them. I have 4, right? And, my color system means different things. So that's a point of configuration, right? What works for you doesn't necessarily work for me. And that's okay. But we're basing our productivity system on the same principle.
Which is calendar and color coding the calendar based on energy expenditure. Very interesting.
And that's where machine learning is going to come in, where it's going to learn with you, right? And that's something that, right now we're beginning to conduct some man behind the curtain experiments where I effectively act as the AI, and I'm asking people to interface with me and ask them, what are some of the things you need from the system? What kind of questions would you ask it? What kind of questions do you need the system to ask you? And one thing I found is that people cannot just create a system out of nowhere, right? This is a journey. This is something I've been honing and practicing for the last 4 years. This is going to be a journey, I'd say, for the rest of my life. I don't think you're ever going to land on a system that works forever. It's going to evolve with you, right? It's personal to you. It's contextual to you. Tying back to the word techne, right? It's all about giving you what you need to be successful at whatever time in your life, at whatever type of priorities you have. And that machine learning element is going to learn and grow with you. And that's going to be integral.
Man, I'm just listening to you speak about this with such clarity and with such passion. I mean, it really excites me, because when we started this podcast series, the Ideas into Action podcast series, it was with the intention of trying to arrive at those principles. Because I do believe, like you, that there are some fundamental principles. There are some core elements that comprise a person's productivity system. Right now, I have a 2-dimensional definition of that. I think it's time, energy, attention, and focus. But I think that that's too surface level. And so through the process of interviewing people like yourself and all the guests that we're going to have on the podcast, I'm hoping to arrive at a more fluid definition of that. But what's amazing is that through myTechne, you're going to be able to accelerate that process of inquiry and arrive at that principle, that array of principles that will then elevate all of the conversation. So all of our podcast network, all of our friends who are doing this will be able to then base our research on what's happening with myTechne. I mean, the big data play alone is incredible with myTechne. What is the foundational question that you're trying to answer with myTechne? And I'm gonna ask you that, followed by another question about the inspiration for myTechne, which could be the same thing. But when all is said and done, what is the one question that you hope that myTechne will answer?
The one question myTechne will answer at the end of the day.
For you, personally.
For myself and for anyone using it, to be honest, because at the end of the day, I'm creating this for myself, right?
Yeah.
It's really, am I living a life I am proud of? Am I being intentional about it? Am I pursuing it, right? And that piece of, am I living a life that I am proud of is predicated on intent and progress.
Okay.
And that comes back to systems. Are you intentionally creating a system and progressing and evolving with it in pursuit of whatever matters to you?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't care what matters to you. That's not for me to say. I don't think that's for anyone to say. And it's really around, I want to help people, give them the tools to be intentional and make progress.
I love that, man, because I feel like success is setting goals and then achieving them at the most foundational level, right? You project into the future a version of life that you want to live, and then you go through the actions necessary to make that thing real, whether they're daily, weekly, monthly. For me, I think they're daily. That's the bet that we're making here at Ideas into Action, which is daily imperative actions are the answer. But it could be different. There might be incremental ways that are more spaced out to get to your goal. But I love that, myTechne is set up in such a way where it projects out into the future for you, keeps you accountable, and then it gives you the resources to shepherd your efforts towards that goal. Very interesting, man. And so what was the moment of inspiration for this? I'm curious to know at what point you said to yourself, hey, what we're doing with the Canvas series is good, but there's another thing, there's another hurdle, there's another level that we need to, overcome in the case of the hurdle, and a level that we need to reach. What was that moment for you? Was there a moment, or was this a gradual unraveling?
So a bit of both. I'd say from the very beginning, there was always an inkling to do something bigger, right? By no means would I have ever pursued this journey just to create a podcast. What sparked it was the desire to share conversations. So there's definitely that element of it. But once I decided to do something that I was very uncomfortable with, and we can talk about that afterwards. But, this was arguably the hardest thing I have done in my personal and professional career.
Wow.
This is hands down been the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life. If you were to ask me, even a month before I had started, do you see yourself doing a podcast? The answer would have been no, right? So having a bigger play, whatever that meant, definitely drove me to be curious, to start exploring what could be that bigger play. And I don't think there was ever an aha moment that the next play was going to be a technology play, and after that was going to be a venture play, and next thing after that was going to be an educational play. That kind of evolved over time, and then it's kind of where we are at right now. And like something that I one principle that I practice is really predicated on a software development methodology called Agile.
Mm-hmm.
So it's having a direction, but then iterating over time. So I don't hesitate, right? I don't stop. Like I don't stall and try to think everything through and then execute. I was like, okay, so this founding principle of sharing conversations with the idea of doing something bigger, whatever that is. Cool. Record one episode, get some feedback, do it again, do it again.
An iterative approach.
Right, exactly. And then over time, you start to think, okay, so, like, how does this all piece together? Oh, these are requirements from people who are creating their own systems of success. I have all these requirements. Why don't I create a product? Oh, I like technologies. And then just slowly it snowballs into something bigger. And even till today, it's like there's this aspiration of the things we talked about from a mission perspective.
Yeah.
What exactly does the tech look like? What is the solution design? What are the key features? I don't know. We're gonna go through the process together, and that's really why I'm doing the podcast, is to document in real time what I'm doing in terms of what I'm learning, who I'm talking to, and how I'm building this business.
So I know that there might be some listeners right now who might still be listening to us talking about myTechne and be confused about what exactly it is. Right? To them, I would say it's a platform that learns and grows with you. But what's interesting is that it took me and somebody who's close to you, speaks the same language of productivity and systems, maybe 2 or 3 conversations to truly understand the concept. And that's not any fault of your own. That's actually the market not necessarily being primed for this thing that they know they're going to need. Like you and I have the same bet. And that bet is the world is only going to get more stressful. The world is only going to get more distracting. People are only going to get more overwhelmed and overburdened and burned out. And the need for something like myTechne will present itself in time. Like people are right now, I would say they're problem aware. They're going to eventually become solution aware. And by the time they become solution aware, your brand's already going to be out there. It's going to have a community. I mean, I'm going to be a champion of it, one of the early adopters. Cannot wait for this, man.
Thank you.
Super exciting. But you know what struck me when you were describing it earlier? You said this is the hardest thing you've ever done. And I got chills because I know the rush that comes from starting a company, from starting any initiative, from starting any endeavor. But you have gone through some difficult shit in your life, man. As far as somebody who's an adventurer at heart, doing wild things, like you were just in the Amazon not too long ago. You went into the Amazon, but we can get into that story. I want the listeners to hear the story that I first heard when we kicked it at coffee time not too long ago. So you and I have known each other for what, like 2-3 years now?
Yeah.
It's been a minute. But one of the first conversations we had, we sat down and there was like this immediate bond where we knew that we were guys that loved nerding out and geeking out about productivity. We skipped the small talk and went into this conversation about like moments in our life that tested us and truly tried us. And so I want the listeners to hear this story about you climbing Mount Fuji because it's one of my favorite stories. It's probably one of the wildest stories I've ever heard. And then I want the listeners to then hear this in the context of you saying that myTechne was harder than that.
For sure. So when I think back about when I went to Japan, for context as well, this was the first trip where I traveled by myself, right? So that was already a big leap for me, right? So I remember this was during the off season, and everything I read was don't climb it, don't go up it. It was during like their monsoon season, which is like hurricanes, tsunamis, and whatnot. And I'm like, you know what? No, like I'm in Japan. I'm gonna check this out. And at the time when I was still at home, I still remember vividly doing research, and I was thinking, you know what? I'm going to show up and check it out. And if it's not safe, I won't do it. Because for background, the trip before I went to with a buddy, I was in Ecuador and I broke my arm.
Oh, wow.
I'm biking downhill, and like long story short, breaking my arm was the best possible outcome in that situation. So that's a whole other story there. So I remember
Amazon,
this time,
Ecuador. Wow,
right?
I'm just parking these right now.
Distinctly remember telling myself, don't let your ego get the best of you, because that's what happened last time. This time you're on your own. Show up, be curious, but see what happens.
Yeah.
So I showed up, and of course I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna go. Like,
Yeah. I'm here in Japan once in a lifetime.
yeah,
Let's
exactly.
do this, right?
I had to do it, and then so happened I bumped into a group of these Australian guys, and I'm like, hey, like, do you mind if I tag along with you? There weren't many people going up, if at all. So I was like, you know what, having a companion is always better than no. And mind you, no one knew I was doing this, right? At the time, I wasn't dating Jo, so she didn't know. My family didn't know. It was something I just decided one morning that I'm going to go.
Dude, they thought you were just out in Japan, just having tea, drinking coffee,
Yeah, right? And so I'm going up there, and I was probably about, 95% of the way up. And this whole time, it's been cold, it's been raining, the air is light up there, I'm exhausted.
Did it start raining as you were walking up there?
Yeah, the whole time. But I'm like, you know what, it's just rain. Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen?
Sure.
And that's kind of like the thought process of going up. And then at around the 95% mark, I'm like, hey guys, like, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to let my ego get the best of me. My legs are just completely exhausted.
Jelly.
I'm not dressed for this. I'm freezing and whatnot. I'm gonna turn back. And they're like, cool, see you later. So on the way down, I'm like, you know what, this is easy peasy. I'm going downhill now. It's been a great day. I did some, I came up, I said I would.
It's a 4,000 meter elevation.
Yeah.
My goodness.
And on the way down, there was like an opening, and I kind of went under it because it started to rain. I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna stand under this little covering, and I'm gonna have a sip of water and just chill out. And so this part, all of this happened within seconds. I'm standing there, and this rain just got harder and harder. I'm like, all right, fine, that's fine. It's just rain. You might be a little slippery. Just be careful. And then that rain turns into hail.
Oh, no.
And then next thing you know, this fog just hits the mountain. You probably can't see more than 10 feet in front of you.
Oh my goodness.
Everything is icy suddenly. This hail is just ripping it down. There's lightning everywhere. All you hear is the wind, the hail, and the lightning.
Oh,
and I'm standing there.
Zeus got busy up there, man.
And this all happened, by the way, within seconds.
Yeah.
Seconds. Like, I still had the water bottle in my hand.
Oh my God.
And I just remember, for the first time in my life, I can truly say, like, shit, I don't know what's gonna happen. And that is not a feeling I recommend anyone to put themselves into a position of.
Were you contemplating that this might be the end? This could be
like it was the first time in my life where I truly genuinely questioned, am I gonna make it down? Okay.
Wow.
And when you face that question and you truly question of, like, I actually might not make it down okay, that is not a good feeling, because you're up there. There's no calling for help. There's no,
there's no reception.
Yeah, there's no reception. No one knows I'm here.
You have no food.
And yeah, I had nothing. I just had this last bit of water with me.
And it was cold up there too.
And it was freezing. That was the hard part, because what happened. Once I hit that realization, my fight or flight kicked in. And my first reaction, to be completely honest, was flight, was to stay put, was to not move. I was scared.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what, I'm going to stay put. I'm not going down this situation, because, like, you can't even see in front of you. Like poor visibility, icy, very strong winds. If that wind ever, like, if I slipped and that wind picked me up, I'm toast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like a walking conductor on this mountain too. So there's also that part. And so I stood there and I tried to wait it out. I'm like, I'm just gonna wait, and it just got stronger and stronger and stronger. It just got windier. The lightning got louder. Everything got icier. And it got to a point where I was like, if I don't move now, I'm going to get hyperthermia and I actually won't make it down.
Man.
Right? And this isn't, running for your car in the rain, right? This isn't running to the subway station. It's going to take a couple hours to get down.
Jeez.
Where that 20-minute adrenaline rush is not enough. Like, you got to move. And
it'll get the momentum going, but not enough to,
So that's kind of it. I distinctly remember there was a point where I said, once I leave this little covering, there's no turning back. There's no stopping halfway. You're going. Forget everything else. You're going to move. And I just remember just going for it. And then after that, I must admit, I don't remember, like it seemed like it happened like that.
Because it was one step at a time. You're trying to navigate your way down this immense fog that doesn't let you see past 10 meters in front of you, 10 feet in front of you.
And not slip and be very careful, right?
Right, and try not to conduct Zeus's lightning on the side of this fucking volcano, man. Like, that wasn't bad enough.
Yeah.
You're beside this thing that could erupt at any second, man. Like,
Absolutely, right? So I remember just getting down, and I've never been so grateful to be on the ground, on land, just kind of going like, oh my gosh. And like I remember when I got down, it was still cold, it was raining, but I was like, you know what, rain and cold, like at that point, all of those things that in our day-to-day life that seem so cumbersome, oh, it's Toronto, it's cold, oh, it's raining, those become completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right. Because
Mickey Mouse champagne problems, man.
Exactly. Right. And so to tie back to your second question, despite that and other things like breaking my arm and swimming across a river in Vietnam where there's a waterfall and whatnot.
Jeez.
Why was starting a podcast the hardest thing? Because at the end of the day, that starting a podcast required me to overcome a fear and insecurity, to have to be vulnerable, to put myself out there. Those are things that has held me down my entire life, right? Like at the end of the day, when it comes to like physically overcoming something, I know my body enough to know that I could make it down if I'm very careful and I'm very, one step at a time. There was that moment of like, oh shit, am I gonna make it? But once I started moving, that thought, wasn't even there. There was no thought of, oh, am I gonna make it anymore? It was just get your ass down, don't stop, just be careful and just move. And once you get into this execution mode, that fear kind of again becomes irrelevant. Like I had no choice, I had to make it down.
I get it, and I love that you have like now this vivid memory, this moment in your life that you can look back on as a real metaphor, right? It's a thing that really happened in your life. You remember what it felt like to be on the side of the mountain, to be afraid, to be cold, to be wet. And now you have the ability to look at any project you're working on and then draw from that metaphor and say, well, there's some principles over here that could be applied to your life, which is one step at a time, which is things that are left by themselves tend to get worse. The things you choose not to face will face you nonetheless. Like there's so many amazing lessons that you can draw from this. But that's not the only story that you have. Like you've got the Amazon, you've got biking and breaking your arm. Where does this desire to seek these opportunities come from? Because I feel like maybe you don't actually need them. Like you have this knowledge, you have the wisdom. Where does this desire to put yourself in difficult situations come from? Something I wish I had personally.
So two answers to that. I think one, the first one being it's, I'd say very unconscious and part of who I am. So I'd say, whenever someone asks me the question, who are you? Tell me a bit about yourself. I don't talk about, where I grew up. I don't talk about my job. I don't talk about even myTechne. I talk about myself being an adventurer. And that's kind of how I see everything, whether it's my personal development, whether it's my career, whether it's my mission, whether it's my relationship with Joe. And that's how her and I connect, whether it's my friendships like you and I.
Yeah.
Everything's about being curious, making progress, moving along, trying things out, experimenting. It's action. It's not just curiosity and sitting there and talking about these crazy ideas, but it's doing it. It's trying it, it's execution. So that's one itch there. And, I apply to different areas of my life, obviously. With my day-to-day life in Toronto, I treat every day like an adventure. So why these wild, travel ones? I think it's just a different way to flex the same muscle, but without being in a work or mental kind of environment.
Yeah.
Right? In a work setting, for example, doing the podcast, before every podcast, including this one, it's a mental fight for me.
For sure.
It's a mental fight.
Because you got to show up, you got to make sure that you're ready for the cameras, to say things that are going to be chopped up into segments over there. There's like a performance pressure that happens. You and I are feeling it right now with the cameras and the lights and whatnot.
Yeah, right? And that's not natural for you and I as introverts. That's not natural at all. And so it's a fight as well, right? Like, it's definitely a fight. So, every once in a while, at least once a year, traveling is very important to me, seeing the world, experiencing different things. And that's just another outlet of doing the same thing, of being curious, of trying new things, of pushing the boundaries, of flexing these mental skills, but in a physical environment. So, when I was doing the Machu Picchu hike, the route that we took was called the Salcantay route. And on day 2, it's called like the death for gringos or something like that, because it's the hardest day. It's like 20-something kilometers. The altitude is super high, and that's where everyone struggles. And just, I remember there's one part before we summited on Salkantay Mountain where, like I would like to think I'm in shape, and I just remember taking each step was so difficult. It was so hard. And again, it's practicing that same, what I would call human capability of taking one step at a time, just focusing on taking the next step with the idea that I'm going to summit, but focusing on that step. And that's the same in hiking mountains. That's the same in entrepreneurship. That's the same in relationships. That's the same in everything.
Man, you're making me rethink a definition that I've held true for a very long time. And I love that about you. Like, you're able to make me question these fundamental beliefs that I have. I always believed that entrepreneurship was comprised of 2 things, which is confidence and risk tolerance. But I'm realizing now that what I meant to say with confidence was curiosity. And I think that's a better definition. So there's curiosity, the willingness to look at a situation and say, how could this change? How could this be better? How could I, make this work? And what do I not know about this? And then the ability to move forward with there and endure any of the difficulties that come your way. So the risk tolerance is one thing, and curiosity is the second part. Would you agree with that? Like,
Absolutely.
That's a good definition of entrepreneurship. Very interesting. And it seems like travel satisfies both at the same time. Anytime you travel, whether you're traveling for leisure, for adventure, whatever it is you're traveling for, you're curious because you're learning new things about a new place. And then you're also subjecting yourself, depending on how you travel. You could travel in a really bougie way and be very comfortable, or you could go all in like you did.
Absolutely. I'd say that framework of I would say it's which ties back to my fundamental version of success and principle, which is to live a life I'm proud of. And again, that comes back to being intentional and making progress. So being intentional with my curiosity to put myself out there and learn about the world, learn about people, learn about new topics, learn about new technologies, and then making progress and move and just move. And I think those 2 combined really, encapsulates everything I do.
So while we're on the topic of entrepreneurship, Raph, we're going to introduce a new segment over here. We introduced it in the last episode with Chris Backus, but it's funny. The listeners, depending on which version of the podcast they get, they might get this segment in there, they might not. Didn't really think it through as much as I should have, but it's the Halo Skull Modifier segment. Have you played Halo back in the day?
No, I didn't.
Oh, man, you're missing out. Okay, so basically Halo had this feature where you could activate things known as skulls. And what they were different types of handicaps. So one would like remove your heads-up display. One would turn all of your bullets into bubbles. One would make the enemies overpowered. Every episode, starting from the last episode, we introduce a custom modifier, something that puts us in a difficult situation, something that stresses us out a little bit, where we have to think differently and break the script for a bit. And if you activate the skull, and it's entirely up to you, then you become eligible for the Guest of the Year honor. And it's going to be a battle that's going to be duked out by all of the different guests who have put out bangers of episodes, which you're no doubt already doing. So let me ask you this first. Would you like to activate a skull?
Absolutely. Okay,
let's do this. So the skull that we have for you is, have you played Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day?
I didn't play it, but I'm aware of it.
No, you missed out, man. What were you doing in high school, buddy? Well, I say high school. I was probably playing it in first year university, too. Just putting that out there. Shout out to Amr. We're going to play David Allen Yu-Gi-Oh! Kwaku, have you played Yu-Gi-Oh? Kwaku knows what's good, man. So Kwaku's actually going to be the judge over here. What we have in this skull, I'm going to show this for all the people watching on YouTube. This is our little Halo skull. Got a deck of cards. This is the best of David Allen's wisdom. So we're going to think about this in the context of entrepreneurship, of starting something up. So how this is going to work is you're going to draw 5 cards. I'm going to draw 5 cards. And then we have to find the best piece of wisdom, one card, and put it face down as far as entrepreneurship is concerned, as far as starting something is concerned. Then we're going to flip our cards and we're going to duel. And how we're going to do is Kwaku's going to decide what's the most effective, relevant piece of advice for an entrepreneur. Sound good?
Done.
Let's do this. So I'm going to shuffle this deck over here. Take a look at David Allen, man. Look at this guy. What a beauty.
I love it. So one thing you should know, and your listeners as well, is that I am hyper competitive. As Joe knows, there's nothing I love more than to win. I don't even mind losing as cliche and cheesy as that may sound, but any opportunity to win at something,
there you go,
I'm in.
Let's draw 5 cards from there, and then so the version that you're seeing over here at the back, where you have just the titles, that's the side that should be facing me, and then you should be able to read the descriptions over here. So look at these cards and then basically pick the one that you think is the most relevant to entrepreneurship. And Man, may the best dueler win here.
Sounds good.
So Kwaku, while we're doing this, as we're picking this, you're going to be bestowed with the responsibility of choosing the best advice. Okay, and we'll do our best to explain the advice too, right? Oh man, this is really tough to do in this setting. Okay, I think I got mine. Interesting. So for the listeners right now, what we're doing is we're going through all 5 of our cards. Raph is looking at his cards. I'm looking at my cards, and we're trying to find one piece of David Allen's advice on each of these cards. And there's like 64 in this deck that is the most relevant in the context of starting up. Okay, I'm ready to go. You face down?
Yep.
I'm face down. I wish we had like a soundboard. Eventually, we're going to invest in a soundboard. We could have like it's time to duel Yu-Gi-Oh! Oh, God. All right, ready to go?
Here we go.
3, 2, 1, boom. Okay, I'll read mine out first. So my card says, and the back of it says, make it happen. And so in the context of starting up, when you start to make things happen, you really begin to believe that you can make things happen. And that makes things happen. So that was mine. Now you tell me yours, then I'll explain mine, and then you explain yours, and then we turn it over to Kwaku.
Yes, I mean, no, in the spirit of being transparent, this was by coincidence, and I had to pick this one because this truly, resembles what I just said. People love to win. If you're not totally clear about the purpose of what you're doing, you have no chance of winning.
Ooh, okay, that's good. Very interesting. So let me explain mine, then you explain yours, and then let's see what happens. So I think that for me, when I started any of my companies, whether it was Skills Camp, Splash Effect, Ideas into Action, Year One, whatnot, what was really challenging, shout out to our neighbors, by the way.
Yeah, right.
I am so curious to know what they're talking about back there. But I didn't have natural confidence when it came to starting something we talked about on Friday, right? I had the risk tolerance, I had the curiosity, but I didn't have the confidence to start. And so it was only when I learned that by simply starting, no matter what shape my business was in, like getting to 70, 75% and just hitting the publish button, whether it was publishing the book or the Skillshare course, was what I needed to build momentum. So things started to happen when I just believed that they were happening. I think that's the best explanation I can do, given the time constraints. Over to you.
Before I go, is there an opportunity to poke holes in each other's?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, you're getting competitive
okay,
with
yeah.
this, man. I was just ready to like show my blue eyes white dragon and call it a day, but geez.
So for mine, I mean, there's 2 parts here, right? People love to win. That's just inherent in human nature. We want things.
Okay.
Right? And I think from a neurobiological perspective, when there is a sense of a reward that kicks off certain, neural reactions in our brain. And by no means am I a neuroscientist. I'm not a researcher, not an area I'm qualified in. But to the extent of my readings and my learning as a student and as a practitioner, when there is a sense of a reward, there's a certain reactions like dopamine and adrenaline in your body that creates a sense of a desire. When you desire something, it feels good and you want to attain it, right? So you want that food, you want to see that movie, you want to listen to that song. So we are inherently wired to win. So I think that's a fair starting point there. Next, so if you're not totally clear about your purpose of what you're doing, that is fundamentally my DNA. It's to be intentional. Simon Sinek's book Start With Why is one of my favorite classics, and that's probably one of the books that kicked off my entrepreneurial and personal development journey. You have to have intent. Does it mean you have to have a solid plan? No. Does it mean you have to have the blueprint and you're just going to follow and execute that for the rest of your life? Absolutely not. But you need to have a sense of direction, and that's for entrepreneurship, that's for life, that's for traveling. You have to be intentional about where you're going, and that desire to win allows you to iterate and adjust and adapt along the way, which again is part of human DNA.
Damn, he killed that, didn't he? Oh shit. Okay, Kwaku, I think I know what you're gonna say, but who won that round?
Nice. Do you mind if I?
Oh yeah, please, by all means, yeah, come through, man.
I gotta go restart. So I definitely appreciate Raf's answer, but I have to go with Hamza. Both of them were really good for the specific reason that most entrepreneurs or most young people trying to start something feel like they're not worth it. And once they're able to start and see some kind of success, you get addicted to the work you're doing, and then you continue to make it happen. Then you lead to where you're trying to say of wanting to win because they have that addiction. So I gave it to Hamza off of the simple basis of the first stage is the starting point, and then moving on to yours. So.
For sure. If there's one thing that,
Thanks, Walker.
had I had that card, just because, something that we're trying to do at myTechne, a part of it is to give the tooling for you to start, right? If we think back about, 20, 30 minutes ago, it's about how can we create systems in our life to get started, to move along, to build momentum, because I think that's key. And, the challenge with having your purpose defined, or even knowing what your purpose is, I think that's the root of so much anxiety in our generation.
So overwhelming, man.
Right? Because everyone talks about it. I don't know what my why is. I don't know what my purpose is. And I think those are great concepts, and I can sell that all day. But I'm also fully aware of why I'm doing Techne, why I'm focusing on the everyday person, while I really focus on interviewing people at the beginning of their journey, because you need to build momentum. And that's something that I think we share a mutual mentor, Drew Dudley.
Yo, shout out to Drew.
Day
one, Drew.
One of the most insightful things he ever said to me was, Raph, I think it's good to have goals, but don't chase goals, chase momentum.
Yeah, he taught me that too.
And that is what systems are. That's a flywheel effect, right?
Yeah.
You don't start by overcoming this giant wheel, or in the case of Will Smith, you don't start by building the wall. You focus on putting down that one brick as best as you possibly can. You do that every single day, you get a wall, and momentum is so important there.
Man, you're so right, man. Did I ever tell you about the time that I sort of hit a wall of depression, maybe 26, 27? One of the shittiest things that ever happened to me is I reached all of my goals. And I know it's so weird for me to say that out loud. I think this is the first time I've ever articulated it in public, but I hit all of my goals around 26, 27. And it was terrifying because I was like, oh, this is what it feels like. This isn't what I thought it was going to be like. I still have so many pain points in my life. Why did I think that this was going to be the answer? I had the title, I had the company, the revenue streams were activated, but still I was just missing a lot. And then I realized that what happened is I set those goals as a 17-year-old. As a teenager, I had projected out into the future with the knowledge that I had. And then I reached the goals that a 17-year-old set. And then I realized, oh, okay, now I don't know what to do. I've lost my sense of self because my identity was tied up with the hustle, the momentum, the chase. And now I didn't have that chase anymore. So I had to sit down and think about okay, so how do I now create these new things that I know I'm never going to reach, but I know I'll be happy along the journey, the momentum journey.
But that's key, right? Tying back to, when I think about what a life that I'm proud of looks like, it's having intent, having direction, and then progress, as earlier, right? It was intent and progress. There's nothing in there about making it. There's nothing in there about achieving what success looks like. I don't think you can ever achieve what success looks like. I think if you're in the process of being intentional and making progress towards something you care about, that to me is my version of success. And, I share a very similar story as you, right? I think I was about 24, and that's probably when I kicked off this whole personal development, productivity, entrepreneurship
You were
journey.
at PwC at the time,
I was
right?
in consulting. I was living downtown. I was living with my then girlfriend. I was making good money. I was partying. I was clubbing, bottle service, everything.
This was the dream that was sold to you, right?
Right. In university, that's all you wanted. You wanted fitted suits. You want to live downtown in a condo. You want a nice job. You want disposable income.
The fantasies that you have as a teenager, right?
And there was definitely a point where it was like, okay, you got it.
Now what?
What's next? And it was really when I kind of had a reset moment on all those things that I really got to look inward again, as cliche as that may sound, and really think about what are the things that matter. And that's when productivity and personal development kind of really start to grow in my life.
It's interesting, man. Jim Carrey said that I hope everyone gets to be rich and famous once, so that they realize that being rich and famous doesn't mean shit.
Yeah.
And I think about that in the context of some of the things that we just talked about. I hope everybody gets to self-actualize. I hope everybody gets to reach their goals, that they realize that true happiness actually isn't tied up in your work. It actually isn't tied up in the tangible things that you get from it. Like, it's a feeling. It's an intangible thing. It's knowing that you're doing something that matters. It's knowing that, you know, when all is said and done, that your life is going to continue afterwards in the good interactions, positive interactions you had with people, in the learnings that you put out into the world. I think that, you know, what we're trying to do through the process of ideas into action, myTechne respectively, but not just that, like thinking about ThoughtWire, conversations, the articles that we put out, just the expressions of Raf and Hamza, is hopefully, you know, we'll be able to be happier at the end of whatever this journey is. I don't have a destination in mind. I have no idea where this podcast is going to go, but we're here, we're doing it. This is episode 8, I think. There's going to be episode 800. We're going to be old men graying, probably like rolling in here on wheelchairs, cutting podcasts until the end of time, man.
But that's the point, right? Like, you know, like this
makes me happy, man.
This pursuit of some end, it's the pursuit, as you know, again, like everyone always says, like, focus on the journey, focus on the process, but I think it's more than just a quote and some Instagram post. This is one wired in us from a biology perspective, right? So humans naturally create progress and growth, and 2, that's the joy of it, right? Like, you know, at the end of the day, you know, and I think I got this from you when I thought of like my eulogy and those kind of concepts. I started to think about, okay, at the end of the day, what is that one question I'm going to ask? And it's really, you know, did I live a life I was proud of? Like, can I say, fuck yeah, that was one hell of a ride. I was intentional and I made progress and I kept pushing until the very end. That's it. And if I can get that, I'm good. Yeah.
Are you going to reach your full potential, essentially, right? It always bugged me when I was younger and my dad would say things like, you know, if I had the opportunities that you had, if I had the platform that you had, that I would be here, I would be there. And it always pissed me off. But now that I get older, I think to myself, like, there was, you know, maybe he might not have worded it the way that I wanted to hear it, but the message still resonates true, which is, we're lucky, man. Like, we've drawn the best cards possible as far as the geographic lottery is concerned. We live in Canada, one of the most progressive places in the world. As far as timing is concerned, best time to start a company. We have the right mindset for it. We have the benefit, the privilege of education, friends, and network. How much of a tragedy would it be if we didn't start our respective companies at this time? Like, nothing bums me out more than the thought of Hamza lying in his deathbed saying, when this boom was happening, when people were starting companies, I was playing it safe. I did the safe thing. I don't know. How do you feel about that, man? Do you feel like, you know, there's a version of Raph that could be content doing the safe thing?
You know what? I'd be lying if I said I didn't, right? I would be completely lying if I said that. You know, when I first started, and even till like today, I still fight that battle. And, you know, like my girlfriend knows, you know, now it's not as regular, maybe once a day, maybe once every 2 days, where I ask myself, why can't I just be, you know, quote unquote normal? You know, I'm 27 years old. I make good coin. I have a fancy title.
Dude, you're loving relationship. Great partner.
Relationship. I got capital.
Check marks. Check marks.
It's all checked. I should be good. You know, why can't I just do the 27-year-old thing and go to dinners every weekend and whatnot? Like, why am I, you know, banging out podcasts on a Friday night?
Why are we here on a Tuesday night?
Right.
You know?
And so I definitely asked myself that question, right? But, you know, whenever that question kicks in, I remind myself all the things you mentioned. It has never been more exciting as a human in human history than it is today, where even just for myself, like, you know, like excluding all the external factors that you just mentioned about being in Canada and education and whatnot, but just you know, if you think about it this way, I've never had more experiences in my life. I've never had more wisdom in my life. I've never had more relationships in my life. I've never had more capital in my life. These are all the assets you need to do whatever it is that matters to you. And it doesn't even have to be about starting a business. Heck, if someone wants to go and travel the world, hey, look, this is the time to do it. If you want to go and join a company, or, you know, to open some art studio or whatever it is, or get into fitness, I don't care. Do it. And I think that's the one thing that excites me the most every morning. That's why I get fired up every morning, is because I have the opportunity to do something. I have all the assets. I've never had more assets and capabilities than I've ever had in my life.
There you go.
Do I have everything that I need? No. But I'm acquired along the way. But in my 27 years of being alive, I've never had all the things I need to do what I want to do. And that excites me.
Man, that makes me so happy. I mean, it's making me really like giddy about all the things that I've got going on. And it's taking me back to one of the stories that I helped to author back when I had the year one project. I think this was the story that actually kicked off the entire project. So I read that Kobe Bryant would, without fail, sink in 200 to 400 buckets a day. Every single day without fail. On his days off, he would go to the gym and he would just shoot 400 buckets. And I thought to myself, like, what an obsessive, weird thing to do. And then I started looking at patterns. I'm like, let's look at other people who are in the Kobe category. Let's find the Kobe of acting, the Kobe of nonprofits, the Kobe of writing. And I found the Kobe of writing. I found Stephen King. He wakes up every day, writes 2 pages without fail. Doesn't matter. All of them are shit. Every now and then, what happens is he'll sit down, be inspired, and he'll bust out Cujo, Pet Sematary, The Shining, and whatnot. But it comes from investing in that muscle and doing the thing that nobody else will do, like living a few years of your life like nobody else will, so you can live the rest of your life like nobody else can. And when everyone else is sleeping, you're up obsessing about myTechne, thinking about the next podcast. Last weekend, people are having brunch. What are you doing? You're cutting an episode with Daniel Breeze. It's outside. It's Tuesday night. People are enjoying the sun. They're having a great time. The two of us over here, Quack, we're in here cutting a podcast. So I think this is a reflection of what we want. We want our respective endeavors to succeed, and we're putting in the time. We're making the progress towards it. And I think that might be the formula that, we can both, we could overlap the myTechne formula, the Canvas series formula, the ideas into action formula, the year one formula, the overlap. If you were to bring those Venn diagrams together, I think it all comes back to that, like just setting that goal, wanting it more badly than anyone else, and then doing the things that will get you closer to it.
Yes, and like as I hear that, this principle again comes to surface, right? When you're doing your research about what Kobe's doing and the Kobe's of X are doing. Sure. Those are those universal success principles.
They are,
right?
It's
no secret, right? There's no magic formula, and that's something that I've committed to my listeners, users, customers, is that I will never create an ebook with the formula, because that's all available. It's no secret, right?
That's been out for a while.
Yeah, that's the theoretical knowledge of when we circle back to the top of the episode. That's that theoretical knowledge, but how you apply it is on you. So for me, sheer hard work and bang out hours and late hours, that works for me. That may not work for someone else, and that's cool. I would never knock on someone who says, "Hey, you know what? On Friday nights, I wanna go out and enjoy myself."
More power, man.
Hey, man, all the power to you. I'm gonna bust my ass because that's what works for me, right?
Yeah.
And so that's so important to really understand what are other people doing, but to really think about how to find what works for you.
So let's use this as a perfect segue to go into the performance points questions. This is what I've been super excited about, because I've rewritten many of these questions just for you. And now that I think about it, what I want to do moving forward, because this is still a pilot season of the podcast, we've asked some repeating stock questions, but I want to tailor them for everyone else, because I think that what we'll arrive at is individual applications of the general principles. So let's start with time. So let's frame this as an executive. You're an executive right now at ThoughtWire. And something interesting happens when you transition into an executive role, which I share right now at Student Life Network, is that the expectation is that this is everything. Like, it's no longer your entry level, you're no longer intermediate. Like, you got to live, breathe, and die by this, because now this is your company as well. Like, you have ownership in it, whether you actually have ownership, but even just by virtue of your positional leadership, you're supposed to do this 24/7. As an executive, how do you carve out time for your multiple side hustles?
I use my calendar. I am relentless with blocking out time in my calendar and planning accordingly. Especially balancing both between ThoughtWire, myTechne, and the other priorities in my life, right? It's not just, career and mission. There's also my fitness, my relationship with Joe, my family, my friends, connecting with the community, catching up with people like yourself. So it's being relentless with my calendar, being very strategic about it, putting in the time, investing in it. Every Sunday night, I really think about, what are the things that are on my plate right now? How can I jigsaw it together? It's kind of like, when I look at my calendar view for a week, it's like Tetris and all these blocks in different colors, and I'm moving things around. I'm seeing what works in the most optimal manner given what I got to do. Mm-hmm. And as an executive, that's been, so critical, because to your point, my job at ThoughtWire is not a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, it should be all consuming.
Right. And I work, I'm effectively an extension of my CEO.
Yes.
And, not only not only is he my CEO, he's a mentor, he's a friend. He's taught me so much about business, and we work together. We're a team, and I always think about how can I help him and help the company, continue to grow and scale. And that's not a 9-to-5 job,
No.
right? But I love it, and again, that's what works for me, and that's something I truly enjoy.
How do you deal with, like, even if this hasn't even happened, but how would you deal with some criticism that might come from your CEO being like, hey, you got time for the podcast, you got time for myTechne, why don't you invest that time back into ThoughtWire? How would you respond to that?
So to be honest, I haven't dealt with that.
Yeah.
That's been something that when we think about some of the things I got to deal with mentally, that's something that at some point I know I'm going to have to deal with. I haven't come across that because I've been able to deliver on outcomes.
Yeah.
So that
keep your ship in shape.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it hasn't been in question in terms of, hey, Raph, you're slacking.
Yeah.
Oh, is it because you're spending too much time on this? And I think that's really it, which is really around thinking about, when I think about my days, from a planning perspective, I would say every hour, from the hour I wake up to the hour I go to, from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, almost every hour is accounted for.
There you go.
Literally. And now, does it mean I execute according to it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'd be lying to you if I said that I hit every calendar event, to the minute, to the second. But it gives me a guideline, it gives me a path, and it helps me be intentional, right? And that is so important for anyone who's doing multiple things, who have multiple priorities. And again, that's everybody, right? This idea of just work and life, that's gone. That's going to disappear.
It bothers me whenever I talk to people and, like, they aren't governed by any system. Like, they don't know what they're going to do on a given day. Like, it's a system breaker to me. I wake up in the mornings and I'm like, hey, I'm on autopilot. Like, you tell me where to go phone. You tell me where to go Google. Because I've programmed this the night before. I know the 5 priorities I need to accomplish the day of, and I know where I need to physically be. Like, my calendar said, be here at 7 p.m. I'm here at 7 p.m. and then I showed up for the podcast. After this, I have my calendar telling me, go home, then decompress and journal and fall asleep. That might be too regimented for people, but I've lived the opposite life, which is totally unstructured, and that was terrifying to me. It's like, what do I fill my days with?
Yeah. And somewhere in that spectrum of no structure and being systematic is where everybody sits.
So then let's talk about, like, the next piece of this, which is, like, how you determine how much downtime is enough. So when you have this unstructured time, when it's time to not be structured and relax, how does your mind process that? Because, like, you and Joe recently, you were at a photography class, and then you read together, you spend quite a bit of time together, you have your solo time for reflection, meditation. How do you know if you're doing downtime right?
So 2 things. I'm intentional about it. So what I mean by being intentional about it, I put that in my calendar too, right? So I may not figure out exactly what I'm doing or where I'm doing, but Saturday beginning at 6 p.m. for the rest of the night, it's, do whatever I want to do time.
Sure.
Go out with Joe, catch up with friends, grab a drink, whatever it is. So I'm very intentional about when those blocks of free time or personal time is, right? This idea of free time for me is just time that I put in my calendar that is for social, and whatever that looks like is fair game. But, like, this, I don't have free time. I can't remember any days or blocks of time where I'd say, I truly have no idea what I'm doing right now. I don't even know if I should be playing video games right now or reading right now. Mm-hmm. No, like you only have so much time in a day, and I think when you're intentional about it, you actually enjoy it more, right? Like, I'm sure you get the question as well. People ask, well, Hamza, if you're so structured, how do you live life? Hey, back to that point earlier, I don't hit it 100%. And if something comes up, having it in my calendar at least makes it visible on what my trade-off is, and that allows me to be more present. So say on a Friday night I had planned from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. I'm working on the podcast, and then a buddy calls me and goes like, hey, there's this party that I got invited to, you want to come? If I say yes, then I know I'm giving up those 4 hours of work. I'm going to enjoy that party that much more, right? And we've all been there when we've gone out to restaurants and parties and there's someone's on their phone and people are on the gram.
Yeah.
And they're kind of just, they're not really there.
They're not there, yeah.
Yeah, like when I'm out, I am there because I know I gave up 4 hours of productive quality time. So I'm here for a reason, which trumps me working on my mission. And that makes me a lot more present and I enjoy it that much more.
Yeah.
And I think that's what living a life is that you're proud of means. That I don't drift through my life and like scroll on the gram when I'm out and not know why I'm out. That's so important.
I feel like you earn your downtime. Like you really work for it.
Yeah.
And then when you show up, like you feel like it tastes better. It's kind of like when you cook your own food. It's like, oh, this actually tastes better because I've been involved in the arduous process of putting it together, thinking about it. And now that it's here, God damn, this is Michelin star worthy. Like this is fantastic.
Exactly, right? Like I'm not always on, when I'm about to go to Vietnam in a couple of weeks with Joe.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be working, and really, doing ThoughtWire or myTechne stuff. And that's okay because I've consciously decided that these 3 weeks are a venture with my girlfriend.
Yeah, guilt-free time.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's super interesting. I have that too, and I structure like I'm a big gamer too. I don't play as often as I would like, but when I do play, I'm all in, man. Like I schedule entire day blocks. Like I had last Sunday, I was just like, I'm playing video games all day. I'm going to wake up and just play Destiny all day. We're busting out the Mountain Dew. My fingers are going to be covered in Cheetos dust. I'm all in. We're going serious with this. And it felt fantastic. I didn't feel guilty about doing it because I knew that I'd worked my ass off the entire week. And I said, here we go. Like this is now structured time. That's downtime. How often do you audit your time though? Like how often do you check to see that you're spending time working on the right things and that everything is in proportion?
Every week.
Every week.
Every week.
And what does your audit process look like?
So, it probably helps to kind of quickly explain what is my system in place, and to really keep it simple, it's my calendar. So there's 4 colors that I use to organize what my week looks like, and then I use a Trello board that I've structured it to be very similar to a Kanban board in terms of agile methodology. And so every week I commit to certain things that I'm going to do, and then I work through the process. I get it done. It ties into my calendar on when I'm going to do it. I budget enough time based on how complex I think it is. Sometimes it goes over, sometimes it goes under. Again, like that's part of life, and I'm not obsessive to the point where it's like, if I say I'm only doing this for 2 hours, it's 2 hours up, that's it. Sometimes it takes longer, but then there's also that principle that work fills the amount of time you allocate to that.
Yeah,
which is why
Parkinson's law. Yeah,
exactly. Which is why putting time is so important. And then at the end of the week, I really just look at it like, how much of the things that I commit to got done? How did that look at my calendar? And that's a reflection of not just work stuff, but also personal stuff. I look at that, and again, is every week perfect? Do I hit 100% every week? Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where momentum comes in, where it's not about dwelling on, oh, I got it, like only 80% done, but it's really, okay, so why did that happen? What worked? What didn't work, and what can we learn for next week?
Right.
And every single week, it's about iterations and improvements, and that's on a productivity level. That's what Joe and I do from a relationship perspective as well, right? It's like what worked, what didn't work, and what can I learn for next week? And that's part of my process.
It's interesting whenever people criticize that and say that that's too robotic, and I think that like you and I have talked about this, and maybe we'll talk about it offline. Maybe it's not a conversation for the camera, but we have certain methods in our lives that enlighten us to the natural order of things.
Absolutely.
There's things that we do that help us see the code in the matrix. Let's not get into specifics. Maybe not on this podcast. Maybe for a future podcast. But that's the most natural thing, to take a systematic, iterative approach to life. Like you go up against a challenge. If that challenge knocks you back down, you go back to the drawing board and figure out how to become more applied and focused towards it. Very interesting, man. You're making me really appreciate that maybe the criticism of being called a robot and being defined as too organized and too systematic is actually human. It's more human than anything else.
Absolutely, right. And when I get questioned that or criticized for that, my question is always, okay, well, let me ask you, have you ever felt time where, like you're not making the best of your time, or you don't know where your time went? And that's a classic one, because I always get people on that one, right? And the answer is always, oh yeah, it happens. I'm like, well, do you know where your money went? It's like, yeah, well, like, how do you not know where your time went?
More valuable.
That one resource that you can't get back. You can make all the money in the world, but you can't get more time back. That's where, I don't care if you're Elon Musk or whoever you are, we all have the same amount of time in a day. That is a finite resource. And, I think being structured and systematic about it, to whatever, again, back to whatever, where on that systematic spectrum you sit, right? I think, you and I probably sit in the more systematic part.
Yeah.
There are people who are even more systematic than we
Big
are,
time,
and there's
man.
people who are less systematic. You have to be intentional, and you have to be, continuously evolving your system. And again, that's why it's so embedded in who I am and what I believe in and what I'm working towards, and really what I'm trying to give to the world. I want to give people a seamless tool so that everyone can also understand that it's really easy to be intentional and systematic about how you approach things, and you can live a life you're proud of, and you're not kind of wondering where time went or what you did, or being on the phone when you're out for dinner. Like, the amount of times I see that just bothers me. Like, I think it's so unfortunate. I really do.
Yeah, same here, man. Hey, maybe I was just thinking while you were saying all of that, like Kanye West, of all people, could be an investor in myTechne, man. It's not a far cry. He tweeted, I think a couple of years ago, he said in one of his like 4 a.m. tweet storms, he said, time is the only luxury. And I thought to myself, like, man, of all the bullshit you're tweeting about, like, this is one that you really got right. Like, time is the only luxury. Everything else is like, what are we really measuring in terms of value here? Let's switch gears and talk about energy. So you've given us a lot of great habits that you have, and I think I'm learning a lot. I've been taking notes over here. I want to know if you've ever had a bad energy draining habit that you've had to overcome.
A bad energy draining habit.
Something that you did that just sapped your energy, that you look back now and you're like, why was I doing that?
Going out and clubbing.
Going out and clubbing, that was your thing? So
You
that's
know-
interesting. Mine was smoking back in the day. I used to be a smoker, believe it or not, man.
So, like, when I think back about it, do I regret those days? Absolutely not. And again, the nights that I enjoyed the most, whether I fully remember or not, it's a different question. But the nights I can say I enjoyed the most, I enjoyed them, and I don't regret those. Just so we're very clear here, because a lot of my friends know, like, I love to party. There's definitely a good amount of my life where it was part of who I am, and I will live and breathe it until I die.
We missed each other on our respective club rat packs, man. I would have loved partying with you, man.
But there were also enough nights where I went out because that's kind of what I thought I was supposed to do.
Right.
Now, mind you, I used to go out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 3 nights a week, every single weekend. I don't care if it's a summer or winter. You go, you jam, you party.
Standing in line, dude, doing your thing, man.
I did that enough times. And, again, there was nights that I enjoyed, but there were so many nights that I can think of now where I was that person I just mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I was at the club. I was on my phone. I didn't even know why I was there. I didn't even know why I came out that night. And just being an introvert, that drained the crap out of me. And I didn't even enjoy it. And I see that so much. And it's because I wasn't intentional about it. I just thought that's what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
I was in my early 20s. Why not? And yeah.
Maybe you know what? Maybe it was the thing we were supposed to do. Like, maybe there was no other way to arrive at the wisdom that we have now. Maybe to have this perspective about being structured and about valuing time, we had to pass through that irresponsible time in our lives. Like, it sounds like we weren't responsible partiers like Kwaku. Like, Kwaku's definitely a responsible partier. He's got friends that hook him up, man. Like, I saw some of his Instagram stories, bottle service every time he goes out. I'm like, yo, who is this guy, man? This guy's just balling out of control. He's like, yo, man, I'm good with my money, man. Like, these are my friends who take care of this. I feel like you and I were stupid, man. We were just like swiping the card. And,
just spend money.
Just spend money, and we lost time, money, and energy. Like, talk about like three resources.
To be clear, though, like, do I regret it again? Absolutely not.
No, I wouldn't trade for anything, man.
I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. Like, for the good nights, fantastic.
Oh, dude,
good laughs,
made some of my
memories.
best friends. Yeah,
absolutely, right. And for the nights that I question why I was there, hey, look, that's informed my wisdom for today, right? And back to that whole audit piece. I don't really do a big like semi-annual or annual audit. I do audits every week because it's about very short and closed feedback loops, and waiting a whole year before you reflect and plan, it's a silly idea. That feedback loop is too long. I can't tell you where I'm going to be a year from now, but I can tell you where I'm going to be next week.
Yeah.
And I focus on these really short feedback loops, build momentum, get moving, make progress, and over time you get way more outcomes than doing this one grand slam planning a year.
That's it, buddy. And how do you now preserve mental energy? Because from the moment you wake up, high octane cognitive output that's involved with ThoughtWire and all of your other projects, but by the end of the day, it seems like you're still just as sharp working on your other projects. How do you sustain that much focus and mental energy throughout the day?
So that's something that I'm still trying to figure out.
Okay.
I've had to be honest with you. I think even just last year, I would say I hit a wall pretty frequently. I'd say every 3 weeks or so, I just completely collapse. Whether that's full burnout or not, to whatever degree that looks like. So now, around November, October, it really occurred to me that, look, I'm doing pretty good in my career. I'm making progress on my mission. I'm doing a lot more than I ever imagined I would do. Right now, the biggest priority for me is this theme about building capacity in the things in my life that I neglected over time, health being one of them. So being disciplined with my sleep. I mean, Joe makes me go to sleep at 10:30, right? Yeah. That was the domino effect that once I got my sleep right, I started exercising better. I can say confidently, I haven't missed a single workout this year so far. I mean, we're only about 3 months in, but
yeah, that's great, man.
100% of my workouts, when I started sleeping better, I started working out consistently, working out better, and then I started eating better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a domino effect. And that's been hard, man. Like, back to one of my strengths, which is also a weakness. Everything's a two-sided coin.
Yeah.
My biggest strength is like I can bust ass and work hard.
Sure.
And
roll up your sleeves, get it done.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah.
And it's definitely something that has gotten me very far in all aspects of my life. But the downside to that is I get so obsessed with getting the job done that I neglect so many things along the way. And that's something that drains my energy. And, it got to a point last year where it's like, by 9:30, I feel like I got hit by a truck. Like I'm just exhausted. Yeah. No amount of caffeine can help me. I'm just like, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. And that's not healthy being at 26 years old. So that's kind of where I'm thinking now is to take a more balanced and integrated approach and build capacity is my priority.
That's interesting, man. So we often talk about mental, physical, and emotional energy. Are you a spiritual guy?
How do you define spiritual?
I mean, do you meditate?
Yes.
Do you have organized faith in your life? Or, do you believe in a higher power?
Yes.
Do you pay tribute to that, all of the above?
Yeah.
Interesting. So do you think that maybe there's a fourth dimension of energy, which is spiritual energy? And I know this is bordering on Joe Rogan-esque topics over here, talking about just concepts that are so out there, but I feel like it's worth mentioning. Do you feel like you can draw on this fourth pool of energy? Spiritual energy, and does that contribute to your productivity?
No. So if I had to be honest, I don't think I get my energy from some spiritual source. I think the practice of being someone who practices spirituality, meaning someone who meditates, someone who searches for purpose and meaning, that gives me energy, right? So not even having my purpose figured out. I don't have my purpose figured out. I don't know what that looks like. It's the pursuit of meaning and purpose and my why. That's what wakes me up every single day. That's what I mentioned about 45 minutes ago. That gets me going. So, is that some spiritual source? Am I internally derived? I think more the latter. That's kind of how I see it.
Interesting, man. Let's shift gears to now talking about attention. So I want to talk specifically about the tools that you're using to help you stay focused. I know eventually myTechne is going to be the omni tool that brings everything together. But until we get to that point, what are the things that comprise your attention dashboard, the things that help you stay focused?
So again, my calendar, this is my baby. I can't live without my calendar. What's in my calendar for that time slots, what I do. Again, because I've consciously decided what I'm going to do and I put that in my calendar, I don't multitask. I don't do different things, wish I was elsewhere. If I wished I was elsewhere, to be honest, I would be there. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I'm very intentional about that, and that helps me focus. That helps me, center my attention on what needs to be done, and what's in that calendar was methodically planned and thought about.
Got it. And what would you say is your single most important strategy for staying focused? The one governing principle that you have when you're sitting down to do some work that you say to yourself, Raph, this is the thing that's going to help us lock in on the task.
Not multitasking. I used to be the worst offender of that.
Yeah. You would multitask or try to multitask. There's really no such thing. Yeah.
And not even just multitasking, I think, but constantly context switching, so randomly reaching for my phone. And again, I am guilty of that. I still catch myself doing that, especially when I am tired and I have less willpower to stay focused. I will just reach for my phone. I don't even know why.
Yeah.
Right. And again,
It's a drug, man. It's like doing a line of coke, man.
Right, exactly, right. And once you reach for your phone, you get lost in some scrolling gram
God.
thing. And then to get back into context and get back into focus.
Yeah.
I think it was you who actually just said on the Cam series where there was a study that Microsoft conducted that it takes about 15 minutes to get back in the zone.
And those numbers are even going up higher now, man. Yeah. And how many interruptions happen per hour is also going up. It used to be like 3 per hour in a traditional workplace, but that's just assuming that like somebody opens the door, like Kramer's like, hey, Raph, can you, did you watch the Raptors game last night where Ibaka punched out, I forget the guy's name, man. But basically now you're imposing those distractions on yourself by reaching for your phone. Like every time you open up your phone, reach for it and you scroll down, that's one more decision you have to make subconsciously. And that contributes to ego depletion, which means that by the end of the day, you're tired.
Yes.
And you just can't make good decisions when you're tired, man.
Yes, and that's one thing I try to do. I try my best to put my phone away. Now, mind you, sometimes someone might call me for something. Like it depends, but I really do make an effort to minimize distraction and multitasking and focusing on one task. With the premise and principle that it was intentionally put there.
Wow.
And that was something that I deliberately did.
Raph, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I feel like when talking about time, energy, and attention in just the hour and a half that we've had together over here, I mean, I feel like there's so many more episodes that we're gonna have ahead of us. Like you're definitely part of the Ideas into Action family. We're gonna have to do entire episodes just dedicated to one of these practices. Not enough time to go through everything, obviously, tonight. But let's wind down with a rapid fire round over here, where I'm gonna ask you a series of 15 questions, and I want you to just say the first thing that comes to your mind. And don't worry, these questions are not gonna stress you out the way that our little David Allen Yu-Gi-Oh! Halo game played out. And you know what? If we have time, why don't we just do one more round of that in the context of leadership? Let's see how it goes. So let's go. Ready for this?
Yep.
Boom. The last book you read.
High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard.
Oh man, very interesting. I keep on getting that as a recommendation on Amazon.
That's a good one.
Okay, you do ebook or physical copy?
Physical. Yeah.
Oh damn, are you like your
physical? Yeah.
Oh damn, eh? Okay, very interesting. Question number 2: what are 3 podcasts that you regularly listen to?
Right now, they are Mind Pump, The Knowledge Project, and the AMAs from Impact Theory.
Damn, and who are the first 2 from?
Mind Pump, I can't remember the 3 guys' name. It's like a fitness entrepreneurship type one. Again, it ties into my building capacity theme right now. And the Knowledge Project was started by this guy who started the Farnham Street. He's based in Ottawa.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of like a personal development and systematic tips for Wall Street.
He's got a great Twitter account too, man. He's just dropping knowledge over there. So good, man. What's a game-changing book that everyone should read?
If I can pick one, the first one comes to mind, Sapiens. And the reason why I bring that up is because, it's a crash course introductory, but to understand humans and where we came from and how we evolved and understanding what are the things that kept us alive, this insignificant species that became who we are, built the infrastructure that we built. God. Understanding what that is and how you can leverage that in your day-to-day life, I think is so valuable.
I love it, man. What's your favorite childhood TV show?
Simpsons.
What's your current worst habit?
Current worst habit? Ooh. Skipping on my readings at night.
Oh, you read nightly, eh?
Yeah, I read in the morning and night. I tend to skip that one just because, there's no reason, to be honest with you. It's just a bad habit I catch myself into sometimes.
Oh, dude, it's a good habit I don't even have. So you read morning and night, so half an hour in the morning, half an hour at night?
Yeah.
Damn, I used to be good at doing half an hour at night. That fell by the wayside. It became like an hour on the weekends. But I've been reading this article. It keeps on surfacing for some reason. I see it on Medium. It pops up on my Twitter feed all the time, which is the most successful people read 5 hours a week, no matter what. Yeah, an hour a day for 5 days straight. Very interesting. Oprah, Mark Zuckerberg, you name it. What does a person need to be happy?
To be intentional.
Mm-hmm. What's an app that you can't live without?
My calendar.
Which calendar do you use?
Google Calendar.
Shout out to Google Calendar. What's your boxing walkout song?
Fort Minor, remember the name.
Yo!
Yeah, that's a playback. Right?
Oh, man. That is, you know what? I know exactly what I'm going to listen to on the way home. Jeez, I forgot about that. I forgot the name. If you could trade lives with anyone for a day, who would it be?
I'd say any astronaut in space.
Yeah. Oh man. Just
How
think
cool
about
would that be? Just think about that first.
total perspective shift, eh? Like you just zoom out. That's the most zoomed out you can be as a human being.
Yeah, and like talk about adventure, talk about anything can happen out there. Yet, you know, just being out there to learn, to see what's going on, to research. Man, I would do that any day.
Oh, dude, have you watched First Man?
No, I haven't.
Oh man, okay, I got to put you onto First Man so badly. Before that, we'll connect after this. Apparently, I got recommended another movie. Somebody said if you love First Man, you got to watch Apollo 11 in IMAX. I'll set up a time. You and I will go, man. We'll go. And Sequoia, if you're down, come through, man. We'll make this happen. What's the most interesting thing you have in your backpack?
My backpack right now, my old first iteration of the Canvas Series business cards.
Whoa.
Yeah, bringing it back, you know, from the roots.
Why do you keep it in there?
It just reminds me of where I came from, right? You know, this whole journey around, like I called it now it's called myTechne and whatnot. But you know, this started off with the Canvas series. It was a canvas as a metaphor for life, and my job was to give you the tool brushes and the paints for you to paint and design your life.
Love it, man. Who's a mentor that changed your life?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say a mentor that changed my life was a manager from PwC, Matt Ambrose. He taught me so much about not even just about consulting, but how to be a leader, how to add value to customers in a genuine way, not just, you know, repackaging a couple of slides, but to truly think about, you know, what's it gonna take to help someone's business, and this idea of growth and enabling leaders to do more is what I did in consulting, is what I do right now at ThoughtWire, is what I'm doing through myTechne. It's been a fundamental skill that he really paved the way for me.
Shout out to him. In one sentence, how do you define success?
To live a life that I'm proud of.
Boom. Running or hiking?
Running.
Interesting. Oh, I thought you would have been a hiking guy. What would be the title of your inevitable autobiography?
myTechne.
myTechne. And what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Best piece of advice I ever received was, you know what, to date back, it was really to think about, you know, what is it that I want to do? And, you know, Matt had asked me that. A couple people have asked me that. And, you know, it's not about coming up with the answer. And it's not about the answer. It's about coming up with the answers. The progress of figuring out what do I want to do, which kicked off this whole point of view and value about being intentional about everything.
Boom, brother. We did it, man. We did like a solid nearly 2 hours of the cast,
man. That was
man.
the longest podcast recording I've ever done.
Oh, we could have gone on and on and on. I just think we're gonna literally run out of studio time if we kept on going, man. You're coming back for sure, man. And I think, you know, shout out to Daniel Francavilla. I had an episode with him a couple of weeks ago where, like you, he was dropping game and it stunned me, or just sitting here and listening and not responding. But this was so good, man. This felt like a tennis match the entire time, man. I fucking love talking to you, man. You have a lot of things to plug, so let's go in sequence over here. Let's start with the podcast. Where can people follow you on your podcast adventures?
Yeah, so you can find the Canvas series on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, all music podcast platforms. The Canvas series includes both our monthly show, which is the Canvas series, our new weekly show, which is Break the System, which is a 5-10 minute episode where we break down the neuroscience of these systems and how do we practically apply it. And then I also launch samples of the guest episodes that I jump on to get people to also learn about my point of view and my story.
I know.
So you can find all that there at the Canvas series. You can find me on social media. At myTechne.io, and that's across all social media platforms. You can find me on LinkedIn at Raphael Wong, and you can find the company page at myTechne.io as well, and our website www.mytechne.io. It's all there. I would love to connect. It's just something that at the end of the day, this is like this platform, this mission, it's for the everyday person. This is not for the elites. This is not for the MBAs or the consultants or the lawyers. This is for anybody out there trying to do something they care about, trying to juggle different things and want the tools to help them, and doesn't want, cookie cutter solutions. And my job is to help them find the system that works for them. That's amazing, man. And so you're such a gift to all of us that you've taken this mantle of responsibility to build this out. I know I'm on the mailing list waiting for updates eagerly. I encourage all the listeners to get on the mailing list as well. Follow Raph everywhere that he said. When can we expect to get our hands dirty with myTechne? When can we expect to see
some of this technology come to fruition?
Yeah, we're planning on the first MVP to be launched to our close group of beta testers by the end of this calendar year.
Wow.
So if anybody wants to be an early beta tester, you can jump online and you can subscribe on the technology page, and we're gonna contact people, we're gonna test it out, and we're gonna do this together, right? Like, this is a journey that we're gonna do together. Like, even just by listening to the podcast and giving us feedback, these are all requirements and data points that I am just amassing all this data and feedback. All of this goes into product development.
There you go. Friends, thank you for listening. Thank you for everyone on YouTube that was watching this as well. Raph, absolute gem, man. Thank you so much for being here, brother.
Thank you so much.
We're out, friends. See you next week.